Hey, what's going on, West Avenue? Hey, I just wanted to show you a picture as we start off today's lesson, as we head into a new series that I'm going to call Edge Above the Rest. I'm going to call it Edge Above the Rest. And that as you take a look at this photo, this was taken actually, you might be entertained by this. This was taken actually as I was leaving the cafeteria, just upset with what our breakfast offers our students at West Avenue Elementary. So take a look. I took a picture of it with my phone that morning of breakfast, and you can see there's apple juice, there's a chocolate milk, there's a funnel cake full of powdered sugar. There's also these cinnamon bear grams there. And lastly, an orange. Okay, so as we talk about today as parents and what I want to call edge above the rest, I want you to think about that actually you can give your children cognitively or giving them an edge above the rest. And so you think about the mainstream of our country right now, and you just can't help but think about it. Immunocompromised people with pre-existing illnesses and disease, that there is a lot of things that kind of unfortunately make many more people susceptible to the devastating effects of coronavirus. And so it's interesting, even on a side note, I was watching the news one night and talking about what, so down the street from us is Fort Hood, which is a military base. And so they were talking about that, having to social distance and not be in the weight room and things like that, of physical fitness facilities being closed down. And so they said, though, that we have to be prepared at any given moment. And that statement alone challenged me a lot, that we have to be prepared at any given moment. Because if you think about it right now, in the course of America and those that are susceptible to this, or more susceptible, not saying anyone's not susceptible, but the people are having a greater number of pre-existing illnesses, that if there was already something very regular or prominent affecting their health day to day, that actually then those pre-existing conditions cause a greater risk of devastation of coronavirus. And so when we think about those things, and you think about the quote that the commanders there at the military base said out of their mouth, that they have to be prepared at any given moment, that I haven't strayed to think of daily that if we were healthier as a country, that we could be prepared for any onslaught of any virus, bacteria, disease, anything that comes our way, if we were already prepared at any given moment. And so what I mean by that is health. That's what I mean. That giving your students healthy food, physical activity, sleep. These are many different things we're going to talk about, a drug-free environment. I mean, there's many different things that we will discuss over these next days, but giving them literally an edge above the rest. That the mainstream of our country right now, in the United States of America, unfortunately, the growing rate of illness and disease is just is becoming in greater capacity, or becoming more rampant. That it wasn't this way even 50 to 100 years ago. And of course, our lifespans have increased, and medical science has been great, and we have done a lot of things, even in manufacturing sides, to produce food to last longer and all these things. But unfortunately, though, if we look at the whole, our country as a whole, that disease itself is becoming more prevalent, and then we have to create interventions to help combat those diseases that were not in large scale years previous. And so, giving your child an edge above the rest. And I share that picture with you as we start off, because this is what your children, and thus the public school setting, free and reduced lunch. We are a Title I school that we get 100% free and reduced lunch. And this is the breakfast, and they say option, but this is, let alone it could be some sugary cereal or something else like that. And this is not every day, but this is the option that your student can choose to have breakfast. This is what we start children off with. And so if you think about this, and so it's, whether you agree with the World Health Organization right now or not, and all the things that they're doing, but actually, you can read a label, and we can do this whole entire lesson that I used to do in the health classroom of how many grams of sugar per product, and you think about that over the course of your day, and then it all adds up, and then actually your body, the World Health Organization recommends that your body is supposed to have 25 grams or less of sugar, total grams of sugar, added sugar into your diet per day. 25 grams. Now, if you are the average American, actually, so if we were to take a lot of different things, it's nearly impossible. I'm not saying it's not, but it's very difficult unless you are reading labels and tracking your food and knowing what you're preparing, or even if you're only preparing your own food, nothing packaged and manufactured, that actually, though, unfortunately, that sugar content is greater than 25 grams if you add it up over the course of your day. Now, the regular FDA standards, or thus the standards for guidelines for Americans, does not have a recommendation for amounts of sugar. If you were to read a label, if we were to show you a label itself, so let me just go ahead. Interesting enough, so I have some labels that are quick to understand. It's really simple, and it's fun because you actually you may have different products in your home, but this itself even claims to be a healthy, baked with love, and a healthy bar to take, whether you take a bar or not. But of course it has some bing words of vegan, gluten-free, non-GMO, so, some things that make you feel good, baked with you in mind. Great advertising there. And so thus, but if we were to read a label, get down to the nitty-gritty of the label itself, and I do have to keep track of product rights and things like that and advertising, and so I'm not going to go too far with this. But in this bar alone, it's 8 grams of sugar. Now, 8 grams of sugar, though it says, servings per container, there is 2. So 8, if you eat this entire bar, 8 times 2 gives you 16 grams of sugar. But if you were to read that label any more closely, that actually under the sugar, everything else, total fat grams, total carbohydrates, cholesterol, sodium, everything has a daily value percentage. It has a percent daily value recommended for, of course, dietary guidelines for 2,000 to 2,500 calories, give or take some there. And it's also based off your activity. And I'm going to give you a ton of information because this is what I used to do and I love, and I'm passionate about health, but that actually, if you're more active, you can consume more. If you're less active, you can consume less. And there is a magic number around 1,200 calories for your body to actually operate, function to its efficiency, that in order to not start to use stores, or basically not to use thinking of your muscles as amino acids and thus proteins. Unfortunately, when you start to really restrict your diet, then your body starts to eat itself, which depends on your dietary goals of what you're trying. But then, of course, losing muscle mass and different things like that. Of course, at low energy, low levels, we are burning fat. In higher levels, we start to burn carbohydrates. And these are all different things that, you want to ask me all day long. We could talk about this forever. But, though, there is not a percent daily value of sugar in your, on any label that you read on any product that you buy at your store. I'm going to say that again. There is no percent daily value, no recommendation, because actually if you were to put a recommendation on it, then 16 grams of sugar based off of the World Health's daily percent daily value of 25 grams or less, stay with me, that actually at 16 out of 25, that would give you about, that's 75, 80%, a little bit less, maybe 70, 75% of your entire intake of sugar based off of one snack bar, based off of one product that you eat the whole thing with. Now, let alone we throw in there our sodas, our sweet teas, our anything processed, whether it be our morning cereals that students eat regularly, whether it be any of our snacks, Crackers, of course, carbohydrates turning into sugar in your blood. That everything starts to break itself down. Carbohydrates and sugars tend to be, they coincide, they go together. But the added sugar, all these things contributing to disease. And if you go with the low-fat option, I mean, these things that it's not readily available, or it's not really, unfortunately, even taught in our schools. But if you take out the fat, of course, fat tastes good. We love it. Butter is good for you. It tastes good. Lard, I mean, so much fat and all these things. But as soon as you take that away, well, it loses its flavor. So you got to put the flavor back in. You got to put that feel-good, that taste in there. What do we shove in there? Sugar. It starts to rise it up, starts to ramp it. You take that, anything that you want to say, low fat, low sugar, all blah, 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 blah. As soon as you start taking things away, you got to put things back to make it taste better. And so you may think you're doing yourself a good job or doing something good for your health, but actually it's unfortunately going to damage you. And you think about that sugar intake over the course of time, whether it be, even the sugar you put in your coffee or the drive-through as you get that drink to start your day. And it could be for whatever ever in your household. Any snacks, those are rampant in sugars that is regularly in our cabinets, in our pantries, in our refrigerators, and you start to drink that or intake that, it starts to add up, and thus contributing to diabetes, cancers. I mean, so heart disease. High amounts of sugar in your blood is not supposed to be there. Your pancreas is trying to, hopefully, using an increase of insulin, trying to suppress the amount of sugar in your blood, but unfortunately, it's at a constant rate. You can't do too much, and if you overload it, then of course you're going to have too much sugar in the blood, reducing circulation, starting to cause all the different problems we know with diabetes. A reduced circulation, eye loss, of course you can amputations. I mean, there's so many things, riddling all your other organs with so much sugar in your blood, and thus causing long-term health damage problems. Whether you agree with ketosis or not, or keto diet or whatever, there's a very memorable scene that there's a movie that's just called The Magic Pill. It's about keto diet and this and that. Whether you agree with it or not, I could explain all that. But there's a phenomenal little scene in there where they actually have followed the Aborigines people. They're the local native people of the country of Australia. And so the Aborigines, they lived out in the bush. They were always hunter-gatherers. They have lived on that land forever. And then what happens is industrialization, of course, us in the West, even Australia started to manufacture products, and thus, similar to us, like America, tons of manufactured things. And of course, we put right in the bush, headed to another part of the country. You put gas stations there along the way to fuel up. Of course, you're out in the bush is almost it's land that is the native land, but also it's in between cities and things like that. It's got to go driving. We put those gas stations there, and of course we also pack those gas stations full with processed foods and tons of sugar. And thus this woman, she's sitting beside this fire, and she is telling her story, and she says that it's killing her people. And they don't even have the date or record of her birth, that she's in her late 50s, early 60s. And so they still keep their hunting and gathering on the weekends. They go out, and these like giant iguanas, these things that they go and just dig them up, and they burn them and roast them and they eat them. And it's amazing, amazing few scenes there of their people. But she literally says out of her mouth that that sugar, talking about sugar itself, is making us weak. As a people, as a culture, as a society. She literally says out of her mouth that sugar makes us weak. And I have dwelt upon that statement for many, many, many days over, I think I watched this film like 2 years ago, and I've shared this with many people. That sugar makes us weak. And it's interesting that she says that out of her mouth as a minority population of the Australian country. And I think of especially our minority populations of our country, not just alone the majority of our country, but disease and running rampant, especially diabetes itself. And of course, our minority populations of the history of sugar is now on the rise, and it's so cheap and making cheap food, and it's contributing to disease. and then it's taking more money to treat the disease, and it's literally killing our people. Sugar is making us weak. Americans, whites, blacks, Hispanics. I mean, literally, you can run the gamut. Sugar making us, or America, our country, the entire world population. Sugar making us weak. It's astounding. I mean, Mexico didn't have the amount of processed food that we had, but now it's increasing, and manufacturing is increasing. We're selling it over the border, and people in Mexico are riddled with diabetes. It's just increasing at an astounding rate, making us weak. But it wasn't there before. It wasn't. You guys, and let alone we start. Unfortunately, this is how many of our children in our country start their day with, at least 10, at least 8, with the natural sugar of the fruit itself. We throw in a giant funnel cake that you would get at the fair as a breakfast, and the funnel cake is actually just, dough and batter, fried, and then my teachers, we go 30 minutes later into the day, and the kids are just off the walls. I mean, it's like you just literally spiked their blood sugar up through the roof, and they've eaten all that for breakfast as they enter the doors. And then we are now required, and it's a gift. We enjoy it. We love it. We are so thankful to do it. But we're to teach students that have been overloaded with sugar. And imagine the effects that you feel with sugar spiking your blood, and thus 30 minutes later dropping you off and irritable, unless you have that at your beck and call. And we continue to snack all day, or we continue to get that pick me up and turn it up, or whatever it might be, that this is how our children are now laying the foundation, and the manufacturers could care less. They don't care. It's almost as entertaining as the tobacco industry. As the tobacco industry was, killing 1,200 people a day. That thus, people dropping dead of the complications of tobacco use, of different types of cancers and things like that, COPD, whatever. I mean, but that this is a regular statistic, and they're having to actually rope more young people into this to get them hooked, to create lifelong habits that unfortunately contribute to their disease and their death ultimately. And yes, you're going to say, Knox, well, not everybody dies. You're exactly right. Not everybody dies. You're exactly right. My grandfather, 80-something years old, smoked cigars, pipes, whatever. I mean, and he made it with bypass surgery. Thank God for modern medicine, saving his life. But that giving your child an edge above the rest to actually teach them, man, think about what they put in their body, and we have, as adults, have control over that. Now, yeah, Knox, SNAP benefits and food stamps and this and that, and what's okay and what's not okay. Well, is it worth it? You either pay on the front end or pay on the back end. And so it's interesting. Healthier food might cost a little bit more money because it takes a lot more time to grow healthier food without all the different chemicals and things that we're going to spray on it to try to make it grow bigger, faster, stronger, all those things. And so we do all those things. It might cost a little bit more money on the front end. Or you're going to pay on the back end, and you have some medical intervention to save your life. Whether we give you some bypass surgery or a stent, or whether we try to combat the cancer that's in your body, or whether, and sugar feeds cancer. Did y'all know that cancer cells actually feed off of sugar? You guys, or even diabetes and the effects of diabetes, and we're giving you the insulin, whether just start orally, and then it becomes intravenously, and then it becomes an amputee, and then it becomes literally laying there on your deathbed, sugar making us weak as a people, as a country, as a nation, as a state, as a community, as a neighborhood, as even an educational standpoint, that we, unfortunately, you Not unfortunately. It's a fortunately. You have control over. Give you a quick story. I sent my students, as we track these things in the health classroom, 8th graders, I sent my students on keeping track of this, of what they eat. And knowing what they eat. And of course, if you can't pronounce it, then why would you eat it? If you don't know what it is, why would you eat it? You wouldn't do that at a restaurant. We throw some plate at you. You don't know what it is. You're not going to taste it. You're not going to touch it. So, but instead, the government had put some things that we have to teach people to read, or even care to read in the first place, whether you can read or not. Having the students to be aware, or even adults to be aware, what are the products in there, of what they are, what do all those words mean? Can you pronounce it? But actually, I sent my students on this wonderful assignment. And then I kid you not, I sat in a meeting with parents and the students, and then us as a staff, and we were doing a meeting for the student. And the student, the mother looked at me across the table and said, "Which one of you is Mr. Knox?" And I'm like, "I'm Mr. Knox." And they said, "Mr. Knox, thanks but no thanks for your food diary assignment, to track the ingredients in the food." And my son was there at the grocery store and taking things out of my cart and putting them back onto the on the aisles there, and putting them back on the shelves. And she looked at me and she said, "I'm not taking my son to the grocery store ever again." And I felt bad in that moment. I felt terrible. Her son in 8th grade is really considering that food is fuel. That actually what he's putting in his body is the input that we put in is the output we're going to get out. Just like we talked about weeks ago. The input we put in is the output we're going to put out. I mean, the input you put in, the output you're going to put. I mean, literally, and he cares, but mom didn't bother. So if you want to give your child an edge above the rest with so many people, unfortunately, not prepared for anything that can come at any time, and those that are harming themselves, making themselves weaker day by day, then consider what you eat. Consider the amount of sugar that you have in your diet. Consider the amount of sugar that you allow your children to eat. But actually, really, pay attention. Care. Like I said yesterday, whatever you build, you're going to have to protect it. You're going to have to protect it. You're going to have to guard it for the foundation and the soil that you work and lay. You're going to have to protect it. Give your students the best, and may they be successful. But, of course, unfortunately, the system that is feeding our children free and reduced lunch is exactly what it is. Is cheap, unhealthy. Not every day. I have to give that disclaimer. Not every day, but a lot of days. Not the best for our children. But you, as parents, hey, you can teach, you can control, you can love and take care of them and give them a different start. Give them a different intake or input of food that's nourishing to their bodies, that is valuable to their success. With that, as always, hey, I love you guys. That's why I get to do what I get to do. I really enjoy it. I'm so thankful for you guys tuning in. Hey, may we live to please Him. Family, love. It's what you do. It's what you do. Let's not just hear it. Let's do it. And because of His love, we love. I want to finish with maybe be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Sugar makes us. Us. Weak. Have a wonderful Tuesday. give them an edge above the rest, helping them to be strong and courageous.